Hey friends, welcome back. Have you ever felt like self-care advice just doesn't work for you? Like you've tried the bubble baths and the meditation app and the perfect morning routine, but they just made you feel worse? Here's the truth. Self-care is not one size fits all. It needs to match our seasons, our moods, and our unique chapter that we're in. So let's get into this. If you caught last week's video, then you heard me talk about how art journaling became a lifeline for me during a time when I was experiencing a lot of grief. You can check out that video right here. But this week, I want to zoom out and talk about creativity in a wider, bigger picture of self-care. So for a long time, I thought that I was bad at self-care. In my 20s, I was very hard on myself, and I felt like if I didn't do the Instagram self-care things perfectly, that I was failing. During that time, my routines certainly weren't perfect, and a lot of times the things that were supposed to make me feel better just made me feel worse. I noticed back in those days that when I would journal, it would be full of judgment and harsh words to myself, certainly no version of self-care. And again, I felt like if I didn't do everything right, then I had ruined it. But over time, slowly, gently, I started softening. I learned, finally, that kindness is the most radical self-care of all. And yes, I still need reminders a lot to be kind to myself, but I'm way more kind than I used to be. Last winter, after I realized I had hit burnout, I really realized I couldn't keep hustling through. I needed to take a new version of self-care. During that chapter, I didn't want to overwork myself or anything like that. I just wanted to feel my feelings, my grief. It's so important. The self-care last winter was feeling my feelings. And that's where creativity came in. Art journaling daily became my medicine and my self-care. The pages weren't perfect and some of them were not pretty, but it was uniquely meeting me where I needed to be met in that moment. In that season, collaging scraps was just the self-care I needed. Now, in a different season, I have energy for other things, which brings me to the point. Self-care really needs to flex with where you are. A key lesson I learned was nature has seasons and cycles, and so do we. We have to honor these seasons and cycles. Winter asks us to rest and hibernate. Summer asks us to expand. Spring asks us to appreciate every little thing and set up for the renewal of what's to come. Fall asks us what is ready to die off. And each of these points in the wheel of the year has such an important focus for us. So we have these seasons in the wheel of the year. We also have, like I said, our inner season. So if you are a person who has a bleeding cycle, if you menstruate, this is one of our internal cycles that we can be looking at. We know that there are 4 phases of our menstrual cycle, and we need and require a different thing from each phase. Follicular is a very different vibe than, luteal. One is the spring of the cycle, one is the fall of the cycle. So this really allows us and demands of us really that we consider what we may need at each point in the wheel of the year, but also our personal wheel. There are also just different life seasons. Sometimes we find ourselves in a very extroverted social season where we're making a lot of connections. Other times we're feeling called inward and it's more of an introverted season. Both of these have their magic, but if we're trying to do extroverted self-care on an introverted season, that can be a little problematic. When we pretend that there's one right form, one size fits all of self-care, we set ourselves up to feel mistaken, to feel broken, to feel out of whack. But when we're able to honor all of the seasons in the wheel of the year and in our personal cycles, self-care can become supportive instead of stressful. For me personally, self-care definitely looks different depending on the different moods, the different seasons, and different other things. Here are some of the ways that I practice self-care. There's creative self-care. There's physical self-care. There's social self-care. There's spiritual self-care. And there's even very practical self-care. Let's talk through these. Creative self-care is what I did last winter. I art journaled, I collaged, Even journaling in words can be considered creative self-care, but utilizing materials to help to create something to deal with our emotions or our state. Lately, Happy Mail for me has become a really amazing, potent part of my self-care, and I feel like I'm bottling joy. If you want to learn more about what's going on with Happy Mail this month, check out the video right here. But whether it's in an envelope, on a page in a journal, or somewhere else, creative self-care can be so nourishing when the time is right. There's also physical self-care. So this can look like long walks in nature. This can look like yoga or some other movement practice and spiritual practice that you may have. This is also where those bubble baths come into play. And sometimes that's just the medicine we need. But again, it's not one size fits all the time. One of my absolute favorite self-care things is to take long walks in nature, because I feel like nature can hold all of my emotions, and like a little house or a little journal just can't the way nature can. And it's so beautiful to surrender into nature and just be held. That's something I bring up in yoga a lot, but also just in general, I'm always looking to nature to hold me. So that's a really powerful physical self-care practice. There's also social self-care. And again, this is for a certain time in a certain season, but sometimes it feels really good to call up an ally, a friend, a loved one, a family member, something, a collaborator. Call up someone and just get in touch with them about how you're feeling, what you're moving through. It can be so powerful to share these things. But in other times, in other seasons, it's more potent just to share with our journal or, in a personal way with ourselves. But again, social self-care is a thing, and sometimes it feels really good to like vent or to express or to celebrate joy with another. I also mentioned spiritual self-care. This is where yoga comes in, and also meditation, but any way that you like connecting with the divine can be a form of self-care, whether that's literally seated and just appreciating 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can feel. I don't know if I got the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 all the way right, but you get the idea. Just being in your body and appreciating what's around you can be a form of connecting with source, with gratitude, with love. So it can be really simple. You don't need to go to a church unless you want to, or another temple or another external space. You can sit at your altar if you keep one and connect with not only your ancestors and all the energy around you, but this giant, amazing, endless source that we all come from. Another way to be spiritual in our self-care is to create a ritualistic environment or a vibe to our self-care. So that can look as simple as lighting a candle before we begin whatever it is we're going to be doing for self-care, and really taking a moment to sit or stand or whatever the pose is and breathe with yourself, breathe with all of yourself as you light that candle, and take a potent moment to ritualize what you're doing. So that can be a form of self-care, kind of turning it into ritual. I also mentioned practical self-care. And so sometimes we need to get a bunch of junk out of our brain and onto a page or onto our voice notes app or whatever. But sometimes we just have a cluttered mind. And so practical self-care can look like making a list, doing a brain dump, doing something, to get the thoughts out of your head and create a little more space up there. This reminds me of my trackers that I do. You can click right here for a video on trackers, but there are so many different ways to do self-care. One is being kind of analytical about it and tracking different data points. This can be sort of a more practical, more of a left brain self-care technique that I use and love. And yeah, trackers can be great. Or again, just writing a to-do list with kindness and really just listing out everything that's on your heart and mind. This can be very practical and very helpful. Also, in this practical self-care, you can check in with your mindset, because oftentimes if we're in a space where we need to do some self-care, maybe our mindset has gotten a little off and we're not in that joyous, amazing place. Maybe we've gotten a little dull or a little stagnant in some way. Maybe not. Maybe we're just living in joy and bliss all the time, and that's amazing. And maybe when we are desiring to do a self-care activity, we also just want to check in with our mindset. So that can be another really helpful and very practical way to practice self-care, is to check in with our mindset and be like, how am I actually doing? So we talked about creative and physical and spiritual and practical and social forms of self-care. But really the trick is knowing yourself enough to know which of these is appropriate for the current moment. Each of these things can be medicine, but only if we match it to the right vibe. Sometimes we need to make a to-do list, and sometimes we need to make a collage. If you need support or want some support exploring what self-care can look like for you, I've created a printable that you can download for free with 50 kind journal prompts. You'll find it linked in the description, and this really is not about doing self-care right, but finding what works for you and meeting yourself there. So in closing, for me, creativity was a balm for grief, and now it helps me routinely bottle joy. For you, it might look like something totally different, and that's not failure, that's wisdom. We can all use our unique creativity to serve ourselves in each season, in each chapter, in each moment, with the varying things that can meet us where we need to be met. So I'd love to know, what is one form of self-care that you continually return to? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, I would love for you to give it a little like. It always means a lot when you do. Also, if this resonates, I invite you to subscribe to my channel for more conversations about creativity, spirituality, and healing. Thank you so much for watching, and may your self-care be messy, magical, and uniquely yours. See you next time.